Widow inherited only one mud house falling apart, but what was underneath changes everything. Elizabeth Mitchell clutched her youngest son to her chest as she stared at the cracked mud structure before her. At 32, widowed for 6 months, she had arrived with her 3 children and 1 old suitcase to what remained of the inheritance left by her father-in-law. The lawyer, Dr. Gregory, had been clear when reading the will. While her brothers-in-law Marcus and Amanda got the house in town, the small market and the savings, Elizabeth was left only with that forgotten rural property in the interior of Kentucky. The adobe house looked ready to collapse, with broken roof tiles and walls that resembled Swiss cheese from all the holes. "Mummy, are we really going to live here?" asked Emily, her 8-year-old daughter, tugging at the hem of her mother's worn dress. Elizabeth swallowed the lump in her throat. There was no choice. After Daniel died in a work accident, she discovered her husband's debts were larger than she had imagined. Their rented apartment in the city had been given up a week ago, and now that abandoned house was all they had. "It's our new home," she replied, trying to sound convincing as 5-year-old Oliver hid behind his older sister. The baby Benjamin whimpered in her arms, as if sensing the anguish they all shared. Chickens pecked freely around the yard, and a skinny mutt watched the newly arrived family with cautious curiosity. Elizabeth walked to the warped wooden door. The rusty key turned with difficulty, creaking like a groan of protest. The inside was even worse than the outside. A dirt floor, a single small window that let in little light, and the pungent smell of mold and abandonment. "At least it has a roof," she murmured to herself, though several broken tiles allowed sunlight to form small beams on the damp floor. In the following days, Elizabeth struggled to make the space minimally livable. With the few dollars left from her husband's life insurance, she bought some old planks in the nearby town to cover the larger holes in the walls. Emily helped as she could, carrying buckets of water from the well 50 meters from the house, while Oliver played with sticks on the ground. The nights were the hardest. The cold seeped through the cracks, making the children huddle together on the thin mattress Elizabeth had saved from their old home. Benjamin woke up crying constantly, perhaps feeling the discomfort of the damp, chilly environment. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Oliver whispered one morning, after 3 days of eating only stale bread and eggs from the chickens. Elizabeth felt her heart tighten. The money was running out, and she urgently needed to find a source of income. In the nearest town, Willow Creek, there were few job opportunities, especially for a woman with 3 small children. That's when there was a knock at the door. Elizabeth opened it cautiously, finding a woman of about 60, with graying hair in a bun and a face weathered by the sun. "Good morning. I'm Dorothy. I live on the farm next door," said the neighbor, holding out a small pot. "I brought some beans. I heard you had moved in here." "Thank you so much." Elizabeth accepted the pot gratefully, but noticed something strange in the woman's gaze, as if she were assessing something. "This house has been like this for a long time," Dorothy commented, craning her neck to peek inside. "Your father-in-law, Mr. Henry, was a peculiar man. Very private. He never let anyone get too close to this property." "You knew him well?" "Knew him by sight. He'd show up from time to time, always alone, always very serious. People used to say he kept things here, but we never knew what." Elizabeth felt a shiver. "What kind of things?" "Look, dear," continued Dorothy, lowering her voice. "If you want to get rid of this land, I know some interested people. Of course it's not worth much, but at least you could get a little money to start over in the city with the children. I don't know, I just got here. Think about it. This place isn't for a woman alone with small children. It's too isolated, too difficult. And the children need school, a doctor." After Dorothy left, Elizabeth kept thinking about her neighbor's words. Maybe she was right. Maybe it would be better to sell everything and try to start over somewhere else. But with what money? And where would they go? At night, while the children slept, Elizabeth walked around the small property with a candle in her hand. The faint light revealed details she hadn't noticed during the day. Small mounds in the ground that seemed to hide something underneath. Stones arranged in a strange way, as if marking specific spots. The stray dog they had found on the property always followed her. Elizabeth decided to call him Duke, and he quickly became the family's unofficial guardian. It was Duke who warned when someone approached, who chased away wild animals at night. In the second week, Oliver developed a persistent cough. Elizabeth knew it was because of the dampness in the house, but she had no money to take him to the doctor. Emily also began complaining of constant headaches. "Mommy, when are we going back to our real home?" the girl asked one afternoon, while helping her mother repair yet another hole in the wall. "This is our real home now, my love. But there's no TV here, no my toys, no my pink room." Elizabeth stopped working and hugged her daughter, feeling her own tears burning her eyes. "I know it's hard. It is for me too. But we're going to fix this place up. You'll see it can be good for us." "I miss Daddy," Emily sobbed. "Me too, my love. Me too." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. That same night, Elizabeth was awakened by a strange noise. Duke was barking softly, a different kind of bark, more restless than alarmed. She got up carefully so as not to wake the children and followed the dog to the outside of the house. Duke was digging furiously at a specific spot near the side wall. The dirt there was softer than in the rest of the property, as if it had been dug up before. "What is it, Duke? What did you find?" Elizabeth grabbed an old hoe she had found in a corner of the house and began digging in the same spot. After a few minutes, the tool hit something solid. Wood. With her heart racing, she kept digging until she completely revealed a buried plank. When she managed to lift it, she discovered a small cavity lined with stones. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a metal box the size of a shoebox. Elizabeth looked around, checking if anyone was watching, and took the box inside the house. Her hands trembled as she tried to open it. The lid was stuck with rust, but after a few minutes of effort, it gave way with a muffled click. Inside were yellowed papers, some documents she couldn't fully decipher in the faint candlelight, and something that made her stop breathing. An old golden key, unlike any key she had ever seen. The papers were partially damaged by moisture, but she managed to identify some words: property, acres, deed. There was also a rudimentary hand-drawn map showing boundaries and measurements. Elizabeth carefully put everything back in the box and hid it under the mattress. She spent the rest of the night unable to sleep, her mind buzzing with possibilities. What did those documents mean? Why had Henry buried them there? The next morning, she decided to go into town to try and find someone who could help decipher the papers. She left the children with Dorothy, who promptly offered to look after them. "I have some things to take care of in town," explained Elizabeth. "I'll be back by late afternoon." "Of course, dear, leave the children with me, and think about what we talked about regarding selling this property, okay? Every day that passes, it gets harder for you all here." In Willow Creek, Elizabeth went to the property registry office. The clerk, a middle-aged man named William Charles, examined the documents with growing interest. "These papers are old," he said, adjusting his glasses. "They appear to be original property records. If they're authentic, they show that this land you inherited, well, it might be much larger than you think." "What do you mean?" "Look here," he pointed to the measurements on the map. "These numbers indicate acres, not square feet. And if I'm interpreting this correctly, the property extends far beyond what you must imagine." Elizabeth felt her heart race. "How far beyond?" "We need to do a more detailed search, compare it with current records, verify authenticity. But if these documents are correct, you could own a very valuable piece of land." "Valuable how?" William Charles hesitated. "I can't be sure without a full investigation, but part of the area where you live now borders the industrial district being developed on the other side of town. Land there has appreciated a lot in recent years." Elizabeth left the registry office with her head spinning. Was it possible that Henry had left her something far more valuable than a crumbling clay house? On the way back, she stopped at a pharmacy to buy cough syrup for Oliver. She was counting the few coins she had left when she overheard a conversation that made her freeze in the middle of the aisle. "I'm telling you, Marcus, you'd better settle this soon," said a voice she recognized as Amanda's, her sister-in-law. "We can't let that woman find out what's really on that property." "Calm down, Amanda. She won't find out anything. The old man was clever, buried everything deep. And even if she finds something, we have the lawyer on our side. Elizabeth hid behind a shelf, her heart pounding. But what if she decides to hire another lawyer? What if she finds out about the records? She won't find out. Dr. Gregory guaranteed the will was drafted to make it look like she only inherited that little house. If she finds the important documents, we'll claim they're fake. Are you sure Dr. Gregory is on our side? I am. He won't want to lose the clients who pay well for a widow with no resources. Besides, if there's trouble, we can always pressure her in other ways. Elizabeth felt a chill in her stomach. Pressure her in what ways? And the children, Amanda continued. I don't think it's right to involve children in this. No one's going to hurt the children, Marcus replied, irritated. But she needs to understand it's better to accept our offer and leave that property before things get complicated. Elizabeth waited for them to leave the pharmacy before moving. Her hands were shaking so much she could barely pay for the medicine. Her in-laws knew about the documents. They had manipulated the will, and now they were planning to force her off the property. When she got home, Dorothy was playing with the children in the yard. Oliver seemed better, chasing the chickens along with Duke. "How did it go in town?" asked the neighbor, with a smile that now seemed forced to Elizabeth. "Fine," she replied cautiously. "I just took care of a few things." "That's good. So, have you thought about what we discussed? About selling the property?" Elizabeth looked at Dorothy with new eyes. Could it be a coincidence that she showed up just when they arrived, offering help and at the same time suggesting the sale? Was it a coincidence that she offered to watch the children on the very day Elizabeth went to town? "I'm still thinking about it," she said, keeping her tone neutral. That night, after the children fell asleep, Elizabeth returned to the spot where she had found the first box. If Henry had buried one, maybe there were others. Duke accompanied her, sniffing the ground with renewed interest. After an hour of careful searching, she found two more smaller boxes buried in different spots on the land. Each contained more documents, detailed maps, and what looked like old contracts. One of the documents was in better condition, and she could clearly read a property deed for 200 acres, dated 1987, in the name of Henry Mitchell. 200 acres. Elizabeth could hardly imagine the size of that area. And if William Charles was right, part of this land bordered the developing industrial zone. But there was another problem. The documents showed the property had been registered in Henry's name, but there were also references to legal heirs and a strange clause mentioning that the rights could only be claimed by someone who inhabits the land for a minimum period of 1 year. Elizabeth spent the night reading and rereading the papers by candlelight. She was beginning to understand why Henry had specifically left that house to her. It wasn't just a symbolic inheritance, it was the key to claiming the rights to the entire property. But she was also beginning to understand that her in-laws knew this, and that they wouldn't give up easily. The next morning, Elizabeth woke to the sound of loud voices outside. When she peeked out the window, she saw Marcus and Amanda talking heatedly with Dorothy in the yard. "Can't let her find out more than she already has," Marcus was saying. "I'm doing what I can," replied Dorothy defensively, "but she's suspicious. Last night I saw her digging on the land again. Then you need to act faster. Convince her to sell soon. And if she doesn't agree—" Marcus stopped talking when he noticed Emily playing near the chickens. "We'll talk about this later." Elizabeth felt her stomach turn. Dorothy was involved in the scheme. The kindly neighbor offering help was actually spying and trying to manipulate her. When the in-laws left, Dorothy knocked on the door with her usual fake smile. "Good morning, dear. How about some coffee?" "Thank you, but I need to take care of the children," Elizabeth replied coldly. "That's all right. But listen, some interested buyers have come forward for your property. People with money, willing to pay well in cash. Maybe it's the opportunity you've been waiting for to give these children a better life." "I'm not interested in selling," Dorothy's smile faltered. "Are you sure? Because, well, sometimes opportunities like this don't come around twice. And you know how hard it is to maintain a rural property, especially for a woman alone." "I said I'm not interested." Dorothy fell silent for a moment, studying Elizabeth with cold eyes. "Sometimes people change their minds when circumstances change," she said finally, before turning her back and leaving. Elizabeth locked the door and leaned her back against it, breathing heavily. The threat had been subtle, but it was clear. If she didn't sell voluntarily, they would force her somehow. But now she knew what she had in her hands, and she wouldn't give up without a fight. That afternoon, Elizabeth began to make plans. First, she needed to fully understand the value of the documents she had found. Second, she needed to find a lawyer she could trust, someone who wasn't being paid by her brothers-in-law. Third, she needed to protect the children. The last part was the most difficult. How do you protect 3 small children in an isolated house when powerful people were determined to get her out of there? The answer came from an unexpected source. The next morning, an older woman appeared at the door. She had white hair, simple clothes, but a dignified posture. "You must be Elizabeth," she said. "I am Martha Thompson. I was a friend of your father-in-law, Henry." Elizabeth opened the door carefully. "How can I help you?" "Actually, I'm the one who can help you. May I come in? It's better we talk away from curious ears." Elizabeth let Martha in and served a simple coffee. "Henry told me about you," the older woman began. "He knew that Marcus and Amanda only cared about the money. You were the only one who truly cared for him in his final years." "I was very fond of him." "And he was fond of you. That's why he left this property specifically to you. But he also knew his children wouldn't accept it peacefully." Elizabeth hesitated, then decided to trust her. "I found some boxes buried here." "Ah, you found them," Martha smiled. "Henry said if you showed the determination to stay here, you'd eventually find the documents." "You knew about them?" "I did. And I also know they prove you own much more than you think. But Elizabeth, you are in danger. Marcus and Amanda have contacts, they have money, and they won't hesitate to use questionable methods to get what they want." "What should I do?" "First, you need to leave this house for a few days. Take the children to a safe place. Second, you need a competent and honest lawyer. I know someone in the capital who can help." "But I don't have money to pay a lawyer." Henry foresaw that too. There was a 4th box buried, with enough money for your legal expenses. He told me where it is. Elizabeth felt tears welling up. Even after his passing, Henry was still looking after her and the children. "Where?" "Under the big stone near the well. Henry said if you got to this point, you deserved to find the resources needed to fight for your rights." Together, they went to the indicated spot. The stone was heavy, but when they managed to move it, it revealed another box, this one larger and better preserved. Inside, besides more documents, was an envelope with money. Not a lot, but enough to hire legal help and support the family for a few months. "Now listen carefully," said Martha. "You need to leave here today. Take the children, go to Mrs. Helen's boarding house in town. It's a safe place and she's my friend. I will stay here to watch the property. But no buts. Tonight, they might try something more serious to scare you, and you can't put the children at risk." Elizabeth knew Martha was right. The threats were becoming more direct, and she had noticed strange people lurking around the property in recent days. Within an hour, she had packed their few belongings, put the children on the bus to town and settled into the small boarding house Martha had indicated. Mrs. Helen was a welcoming woman who didn't ask too many questions. She gave them a simple but clean room and offered to look after the children while Elizabeth sorted out her problems. The next morning, Elizabeth was in the office of Dr. Richard Anderson, the lawyer recommended by Martha. He was a man in his 50s, with graying hair but lively, intelligent eyes. "These documents are extraordinary," he said after examining everything carefully. "If they are authentic, and everything indicates they are, you are the owner of an area that is now worth millions of dollars." Millions. The industrial district being developed, part of it is being built on land that, according to these documents, belongs to you. The companies that bought the lots likely bought from people who had no legal right to sell. Elizabeth felt dizzy. "This means that It means you can claim not only possession of the lands, but also compensation for all the development done without your authorization? We're talking about a very significant amount." "And my brothers-in-law? Do they know about this?" "From what you've told me, they definitely know. And they're probably already receiving some kind of improper payment for lands that don't belong to them." Dr. Richard explained the legal process. First, they would need to authenticate the documents, then file a property claim lawsuit, finally sue for damages and misuse of the land. "But I must warn you," he said seriously, "it will be a long and difficult battle. They will hire the best lawyers, they will try to discredit you and the documents. They will use every possible resource to avoid losing so much money. And the children? Will they be safe? We will do everything possible to ensure that. But you need to be prepared to face pressure, intimidation, perhaps even more serious threats." Elizabeth thought of the children sleeping peacefully at the boarding house. She thought of Henry, who had trusted her to care for this inheritance. She thought of the clay house that could become the symbol of a new life for her family. "I am prepared," she said finally. In the following days, while Dr. Richard initiated the legal proceedings, Elizabeth remained at the boarding house with the children. Martha called every day with news from the property. "Some men showed up here last night," she said in one call. "They were poking around near the house looking for something. Duke barked so much they left. Are you safe?" "I am. But it's better you don't come back yet. Let me handle things here for a few more days." Elizabeth felt torn. On one hand, she wanted to return to the house and fight for what was hers. On the other, she knew she needed to protect the children above all else. The answer of which path to take came faster than she expected. Dr. Richard called on Wednesday morning, his voice tense. "Elizabeth, you need to come here urgently. They've filed a lawsuit against you." "What do you mean?" "Marcus and Amanda are alleging that you forged the documents. They're asking for a court order to prevent you from claiming any rights to the property." Elizabeth felt the ground give way beneath her feet. "Can they do that?" "They can try. But we have proof of the document's authenticity. The problem is that now everything will be settled in court, and they have the resources to drag out the process indefinitely." When Elizabeth arrived at the office, Dr. Richard showed her the papers from the lawsuit filed by her brothers-in-law. They alleged that Elizabeth had forged historical documents to claim property that didn't belong to her. Even worse, they were requesting she be investigated for document forgery. "If the forgery accusation succeeds, you could even be arrested," the lawyer explained. "But the documents are real." "I know, you know. But proving it in court will require expensive expert analysis, detailed historical investigation, comparison with old archives. All of that costs a lot of money and takes months or years." Elizabeth felt cornered. Her brothers-in-law had managed to turn her from victim into criminal. "What can I do?" "Fight. But I need to be honest with you, they've chosen the perfect strategy. Even if we win in the end, the process could take years. And during this time, your reputation will be tarnished, and you won't be able to claim your rights to the property." "What if I give up?" "If you give up, they offer a deal. You keep the clay house and a small plot of land around it, they keep the rest. And you sign a document acknowledging you never had a right to anything more." Elizabeth left the office with her head spinning. The children were waiting for her at the boarding house, Oliver still coughing, Emily asking when they would go home, Benjamin needing new diapers she didn't have the money to buy. Maybe it was better to accept the deal. At least they would have a place to live, and she could look for work without the pressure of a lawsuit. But when she arrived at the boarding house and saw the children playing in the small courtyard, something inside her rebelled. Why should Marcus and Amanda get an inheritance that wasn't theirs? Why should she settle for crumbs when Henry had made it clear he wanted to give her a chance to start over? That night, Elizabeth called Martha. "How are things over there?" "Complicated," replied Henry's friend. "Some tractors showed up today. They said they're going to start clearing the land for a new development." "They can't do that. The property is under legal dispute." "They can, and they are. They even brought documents saying they have legal authorization." Elizabeth felt anger boiling inside her. "Martha, I'm coming back." "Elizabeth, it's not safe." "It doesn't matter. That is my home. It's my children's inheritance. I won't let them destroy everything while I hide here." "And the children?" "I'll leave them with Mrs. Helen for a few more days, but I need to be there to defend what is ours." The next morning, Elizabeth took the first bus back to the property. When she arrived, she found a scene that made her furious. 2 tractors were knocking down the fruit trees Henry had planted years ago, and uniformed men were measuring and marking the land. "Stop!" she shouted, running towards the workers. A man in overalls approached, scowling. "You can't be here. This area is being appropriated for public development." "Appropriated? This is private property. Not according to the documents I have here." He showed a folder. "This area has been declared of public utility for the expansion of the industrial district." Elizabeth felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Public utility, but that's not legal. It's very legal, and you can be arrested for trespassing if you don't leave immediately. Elizabeth looked around, seeing the destruction that had already been done. The chickens were running scared, Duke was barking incessantly, and the small clay house seemed even more fragile and abandoned amidst all that heavy machinery. But one thing caught her attention. Martha was talking to one of the workers, and the man seemed nervous, constantly looking at Elizabeth. When the tractors stopped for lunch, Martha approached. "I got some interesting information," she said in a low voice. "The foreman told me he received orders to do this job quickly, before the justice system complicated things. Does that mean they know they could lose in court?" "Exactly, and there's more. He said they were instructed to look for anything buried and hand it over to the bosses." Elizabeth understood the strategy. If they managed to destroy the property and remove any evidence of the buried documents, it would be much harder to prove the historical rights to the land. "Martha, can you stay here to keep watch? I need to go back to the city and talk to the lawyer. This can't be legal." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In Dr. Richard's office, Elizabeth found the lawyer on the phone, arguing heatedly with someone. "Yes, I understand there is an eminent domain proceeding, but my client has prior rights that must be respected." "What do you mean, denied? On what grounds?" When he hung up, his face was grim. "Bad news," he said. "They obtained an injunction for eminent domain for public use. They claim the area is necessary for the expansion of the industrial district and job creation. But that's a lie. They just want to stop me from claiming my rights." "I know, but legally and morally right aren't always the same thing. The judge who granted the injunction, well, let's just say he has close ties to some influential people in the region." Elizabeth sat down heavily in the chair. "So I lost? Is that it?" "Not necessarily. We can appeal the decision, but it will take time, and in the meantime they can continue destroying the property." "What if I don't leave? If I physically resist?" "You could be arrested for contempt of court and resisting a legal order, and then you wouldn't be able to care for the children." Elizabeth left the office feeling defeated. It seemed that no matter how hard she fought, her in-laws always managed to stay one step ahead. But as she was walking back to the boarding house, her phone rang. It was Martha, and her voice was agitated. "Elizabeth, you need to come here now." "What happened?" "Duke found something else, something that could change everything." Elizabeth took a taxi and rushed back to the property. She found Martha in the yard, holding a box different from the others, larger, more ornate, obviously older. "The dog was digging near the big rock when the tractors stopped for lunch. I found this buried very deep, in a stone chamber built specifically to protect the contents." Elizabeth opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were documents that seemed even older than the others, some detailed hand-drawn maps, and something that made her stop breathing. An original deed dated 1952, recording the purchase of 500 acres of land by Henry Mitchell. 500 acres, she whispered. "Read here," Martha pointed to a specific paragraph. "This deed documents the purchase not only of the land we're on, but of an area that includes what is now the town centre and part of the industrial district." Elizabeth read and reread the document. If it was authentic, it meant that practically half the town had been built on land that belonged to Henry, and now to her. Why did he never claim these rights? "Look at the date," Martha pointed. 1952. Henry was 20 years old when he bought this land, probably with money he saved working since he was a boy. But back then, a poor young man had no way to fight powerful people who kept taking pieces of the property over the years. And why did he keep the documents? For the descendants, for you. He knew that one day someone in the family would be in a position to fight for justice. Elizabeth looked around. The tractors had returned from lunch and were continuing the destruction. But now she had in her hand something that could change everything. "Martha, can you keep this somewhere safe? I need to take it to the lawyer immediately." Back at Dr. Richard's office, Elizabeth placed the new deed on the desk. The lawyer examined the document with a magnifying glass, checking every detail. "My God," he murmured, "if this is authentic." "Is it?" "It appears to be, but we need a full expert analysis." "Elizabeth, do you understand what this means?" "That I own more land than I imagined?" "Much more. This deed documents the original ownership of an area that today is worth, I can't even calculate, tens of millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars." Elizabeth felt dizzy. "How is that possible?" "Over the years, pieces of this property were sold or occupied illegally. Probably with the connivance of local authorities, false records, forged documents. But if this original deed is recognized by the courts, you're entitled not only to the lands but to compensation for decades of improper use. And now, what do we do? Now we fight. For real. I'm going to file a federal lawsuit, contest the expropriation, request an investigation into corruption in the process. This is going to become a very big case, Elizabeth." "Big how?" "Big enough to appear in the newspapers, to get the attention of authorities in Washington, D.C., to make very powerful people very nervous." Elizabeth thought of the children at the boarding house, of Oliver with his lingering cough, of Emily asking when they would go back home. "Dr. Richard, I want us to fight, but I need a guarantee. The children must stay safe. I'll arrange protection. And Elizabeth, from now on you cannot be alone. This case involves too much money for people of dubious character to simply give up." That night, Elizabeth stayed at the boarding house thinking about everything she had discovered. Henry hadn't left her just a clay house. He had left a legacy that could change not only her life and the children's, but possibly expose decades of corruption and illegal land appropriation. But he had also left a target on her back. The next morning, Dr. Richard called early. "Elizabeth, we have problems. And we have good news. Which do you want to hear first?" "The bad ones. Someone broke into my office last night. They only took the files related to your case." Elizabeth felt her stomach turn to ice. "And the good news? I had kept copies of everything in another place, and I just got a call from the federal prosecutor's office. They want to investigate irregularities in the region's expropriation processes." "Is that good for us?" "It's very good. It means federal authorities already had their eyes on the situation. Your case could be the key to exposing a much larger scheme." Elizabeth felt torn between relief and fear. On one hand, it seemed they would finally have official support to fight for their rights. On the other, she knew that the bigger the case became, the greater the danger for her and the children. The decision of which path to take was made for her when she arrived at the property that afternoon and found the clay house partially demolished. The tractors had knocked down one of the walls, and the workers were sifting through the rubble, obviously looking for something. When they saw her arrive, they stopped working and moved away. Elizabeth walked to where the children's room used to be. The small mattress was covered in dust and pieces of adobe. The few little clothes they had left were scattered on the ground, dirty and torn. That's when she saw Duke. The dog was lying near the wreckage, visibly injured, breathing with difficulty. One of his hind legs was at a strange angle. "What did they do to you, boy?" She knelt beside the animal, who tried to wag his tail when he saw her. One of the workers approached, embarrassed. "Ma'am, it was an accident. The dog wouldn't get out of the way of the tractor." Elizabeth felt rage explode inside her. It wasn't enough that they destroyed the house. They had also hurt the only loyal friend the family had found in that place. She carried Duke in her arms to Martha's pickup truck, and they rushed to the vet in town. The doctor examined the animal and gave the diagnosis: broken leg, some cuts, but nothing that couldn't be treated. "He'll be fine," the vet assured, "but he needs rest and care for a few weeks." While Duke was being treated, Elizabeth made a decision. She called Dr. Richard. "Doctor, I want to file every possible action. I want to sue the brothers-in-law, the city hall, the companies that bought land illegally, everyone who was involved in this scheme." Elizabeth, are you sure? This will be a war. I'm sure. They destroyed my home, hurt my dog, threatened my family. Now, it's personal. In the following days, Dr. Richard worked intensely preparing a series of lawsuits. The forensic analysis confirmed the authenticity of the 1952 deed. The federal prosecutor's office opened an official investigation into land irregularities in the region. And journalists began to take an interest in the story of the widow who discovered she owned half the industrial district. But the in-laws didn't stay idle. On Wednesday, Elizabeth received an unexpected visit at the boarding house. It was Dr. Gregory, the lawyer who had read the will. "Elizabeth, we need to talk," he said with his usual oily smile. "We have nothing to talk about." "Yes, we do. About the future of your children." Elizabeth felt a chill down her spine. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that lawsuits are very complicated things. They can last for years. And during this time, a single mother might face difficulties proving she can adequately care for her children. The threat was clear. They would try to take the children from her. Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering a solution. My clients are willing to make a very generous settlement. You get a new house in town, receive a sum of money sufficient to support the children for many years, and in return you renounce any rights to the rural property." "And if I refuse?" "Well, accidents happen. Lawsuits get complicated. Children might end up needing specialized care that a mother in financial hardship might not be able to provide." Elizabeth stood up, trembling with anger. "Get out. Think it over, Elizabeth. You have until Friday to decide." After Dr. Gregory left, Elizabeth immediately called Dr. Richard and told him about the threats. "This proves they're desperate," said the lawyer, "but it also means the danger is escalating. Elizabeth, I'm going to arrange police protection for you and the children." "Police protection? But that will scare the children. Better scared than at risk. And Elizabeth, I think the time has come to make this case public. The more exposure it gets, the harder it will be for them to try to intimidate you." On Friday morning, Elizabeth woke up to the phone ringing insistently. It was a journalist from a regional newspaper. "Mrs. Elizabeth, my name is Richard Johnson. I'm a reporter. I heard about your story and would like to do a piece on the case." "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Mrs. Elizabeth, media exposure might be your best protection right now. People who make threats in the dark don't like the spotlight." Elizabeth spoke with Dr. Richard, who agreed. On Friday afternoon, the journalist came to the boarding house and did a full interview. Elizabeth told the whole story. The unexpected inheritance, the discovery of the documents, the threats, the destruction of the house. "And the children, how are they dealing with all this?" asked the reporter. Elizabeth looked at Emily playing in the yard with her siblings, unaware of all the tension surrounding her. "They are strong, but they deserve a better life. That's why I'm fighting." The article was published in the Sunday edition and caused an impact Elizabeth hadn't expected. The boarding house phone didn't stop ringing. Other journalists wanted interviews. Lawyers offered help. Ordinary people called to show their support. But the most important call came on Monday morning. "Mrs. Elizabeth, this is Dr. Charles Henderson, prosecutor with the Federal Prosecutor's Office. I read the article about your case and would like to speak in person." The prosecutor came to town on Tuesday. He was a young, serious man who examined all the documents with meticulous care. "Mrs. Elizabeth, your case is much more important than you imagine," he said finally. "We're investigating a land-grabbing scheme that may involve dozens of properties and millions of dollars in fraudulent transactions." "Land grabbing?" "Illegal appropriation of land through fake documents, bribing officials, intimidating legitimate owners. Your father-in-law, Henry, may have been one of the first victims, and you may be the key to exposing everything." "What does this mean for me and my family?" "It means you now have federal protection, and it means, if we can prove everything we suspect, you won't just get your land back, you'll help hundreds of other families who were victims of the same scheme." Elizabeth felt crushed by the weight of responsibility. She just wanted a safe home for her children. Now she discovered she was at the center of a case that could affect the lives of hundreds of people. "Dr. Charles, I just need to know, Will my family be safe? We will do everything in our power to ensure that. But Elizabeth, you need to understand. People involved in this kind of scheme have a lot to lose. They will fight with every resource available, including harming the children. We hope it doesn't come to that, but we will take every precaution. On Wednesday, Elizabeth received news that left her torn between joy and apprehension. The federal court had granted an injunction suspending the property's expropriation. The demolition work was halted, and she could return to the house. But the house is partially destroyed, Martha reminded her when Elizabeth called to share the news. It doesn't matter. It's my home. It's where Henry wanted me to stay. It's where I'll raise my children. That afternoon, Elizabeth, the children, and Duke, still limping but excited, returned to the property. The house was in ruins, but 2 walls were still standing, and part of the roof was intact. "We're going camping, kids," Elizabeth announced, setting up mattresses on the floor of the remaining living room, while Mommy fixes the house. "Is it like an adventure?" asked Oliver, still coughing but visibly more cheerful to be back. "It's exactly like an adventure." Over the next few weeks, Elizabeth worked tirelessly to make the house habitable again. Neighbors who had previously avoided her began to show up offering help. The newspaper article had changed the community's perception of her. "We always knew something was wrong with these expropriations," said Mr. Walter, a neighboring farmer, "but we never had the courage to confront powerful people on our own. And now? Now you've shown it's possible to fight." Several families in the area are looking for lawyers to review their own situations. Elizabeth realized she had unwittingly become a kind of symbol of resistance for small landowners in the region. The responsibility was intimidating, but it also gave her strength to keep fighting. In October, 3 months after returning to the house, Elizabeth received a visit from Dr. Charles with important news. "The investigation is progressing very well," said the prosecutor. "We've found evidence that at least 15 properties in the region have been targeted for land grabbing over the last 20 years. And those responsible? Marcus and Amanda are just small pieces in the scheme. Behind them is a group of businessmen, some local politicians, notary offices involved in forgery. It's a complex network." "What about my rights to the land?" "That's the good news. The forensic examination has definitively confirmed the authenticity of all the documents. You are legally the owner of an area much larger than the house you live in." "How much larger?" Dr. Charles showed a detailed map. "Look here. All this shaded area belongs to you. It includes part of the industrial district, some residential neighborhoods in town, and several farms that were illegally sold over the years." Elizabeth looked at the map, trying to comprehend the extent of what she was seeing. "This means that—" "It means you are probably one of the largest landowners in the region, and you are entitled to compensation for decades of improper use of your property." "Compensation of how much?" "The initial estimates—" "Well, Elizabeth, you need to sit down to hear this." Elizabeth sat down, her heart racing. "We're talking about something between $50 and $100 million. Elizabeth's world stopped. 50 million. 100 million? It was more money than she could imagine. This can't be right. It is right. Decades of urban and industrial development on lands that were not legally acquired. You are entitled not only to the return of the lands, but to the profits generated by that development." Elizabeth looked out the window of the rebuilt house, seeing Emily playing in the yard with her brothers. Oliver had completely recovered from his cough. Benjamin was growing strong and healthy. Duke was chasing the chickens, his leg almost completely healed. "Dr. Charles, what do I do with so much money?" The prosecutor smiled. "That's a question most people would like to have to answer. But Elizabeth, we're not there yet. The legal process will last at least another year, and the people involved in the scheme will fight to the end to avoid losing so much money." "Can they still harm me?" "They can try. That's why the federal protection continues. But with each passing day, as more evidence emerges, it gets harder for them." That night, Elizabeth walked through the land where it all began. The spot where Duke had dug and found the first box, the well where Henry had hidden the money for his legal expenses, the large rock where the 1952 deed was buried. She thought of her father-in-law, who had worked his whole life knowing his lands had been stolen, but quietly kept the documents that would one day allow for justice. She thought of Daniel, who, if he were alive, would be proud to see the family finally receiving what rightfully belonged to them. And she thought of the children, who would grow up knowing it is possible to fight for what is right, even when victory seems impossible. But the fight wasn't over yet. The following week, Elizabeth was surprised by the visit of an elegant woman, around 50 years old, who arrived in a luxury car. "You must be Elizabeth," said the woman, extending a hand with perfectly manicured nails. "I am Patricia Reynolds, representative of a group of investors interested in making a deal." "What kind of deal?" "A deal that could make this entire legal battle unnecessary. My clients are willing to pay a very generous sum for the property, in cash without legal complications." "How much?" $20 million, Elizabeth almost choked. 20 million was more money than she had ever dreamed of having, but Dr. Charles had said she was entitled to 50 or 100 million. "Why would your clients make such a high offer if they think I have no legitimate rights to the property?" Patricia smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because they value efficiency. Legal proceedings are unpredictable. They can last for years. They can generate very high costs for everyone involved. This offer allows everyone to come out ahead. Everyone except me, apparently." "How so?" "If you're offering 20 million to avoid a lawsuit, it must be because you know I'm entitled to much more." Patricia's smile vanished completely. "Elizabeth, you need to understand that not every legal victory turns into real money. Lawsuits can be complicated. Assets can disappear during endless appeals. Witnesses can change their minds." The threat was implicit, but clear. "Miss Patricia, my answer is no. Don't be reckless. Think of the children. Think of your family's safety. 20 million can provide a very comfortable life for you all, far from complications." "Think carefully about your next words," said Elizabeth, feeling her anger rise. "Because any threat to my family will be reported directly to the federal prosecutor's office." Patricia stood up, the mask of civility completely falling away. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Elizabeth." "Actually, I know exactly. I'm dealing with people who stole land that belonged to my family, and who are now afraid of having to pay for what they did." After Patricia left, Elizabeth immediately called Dr. Charles and reported the conversation. The prosecutor sounded worried. "Elizabeth, the fact they offered 20 million confirms they know the property's true value, but it also confirms they're desperate. Is that bad for us?" "It could be dangerous. Desperate people with a lot of money at stake can take extreme actions. What do you recommend?" "That you and the children agree to stay in official protection for a few weeks, just until we finalize the most critical phase of the investigation." Elizabeth looked at the children playing in the yard. Emily was teaching Oliver how to care for the chickens. Benjamin was crawling after Duke. They finally seemed happy and safe in the rebuilt house. "Dr. Charles, I can't take the children away from here again. They've already suffered too much from constant moves." "Elizabeth." "No. We're staying. This is our home. Henry left us here to stay. And if powerful people want to scare us, they'll have to do it out in the open in front of everyone." The prosecutor sighed. "Then I'll increase security. But Elizabeth, at the first sign of real danger, you leave." "Understood." "Understood." In the following weeks, the tension in the area became palpable. Strange cars passed slowly on the road leading to the property. Elizabeth's phone would ring at odd hours, but when she answered, she only heard silence on the other end. One night, Duke woke up barking furiously. Elizabeth got up and saw lights moving outside the house. She picked up the phone to call the police, but the line was dead. Through the window glass, she could see 3 men prowling the property with powerful flashlights, apparently searching for something. Elizabeth woke the children quietly and took them to the bathroom, the innermost room of the house. "Mommy, what's happening?" whispered Emily. "It's just a precaution, my love. Stay here quietly while Mommy handles something." Elizabeth returned to the living room and watched the men outside. They didn't seem interested in entering the house. They were digging in several spots on the land, as if searching for more buried documents. She remembered the cell phone Dr. Charles had given her for emergencies and called. "Dr. Charles, it's 3 in the morning, but there are men digging on my land. I'm sending backup now. Elizabeth, do not leave the house for any reason." 15 minutes later, the men's lights disappeared. When the police arrived, they found no one, but the land was full of holes, as if they had combed every inch, searching for something. "They were looking for more documents," concluded Dr. Charles when he arrived the next morning, probably afraid that Henry had hidden even more damning evidence. He hid it? It's possible. Men in his situation sometimes leave multiple safeguards, documents hidden in different places, copies with trusted people. Elizabeth thought of Henry, of the quiet, reserved man she had known. Had he foreseen that the fight for the family's rights would be this intense? The answer came from an unexpected source. The following week, an elderly man appeared on the property, thin, with simple clothes and a worn straw hat. "Are you Elizabeth?" he asked with a heavy accent. "I am. How can I help you?" "My name is John Parker. I was a friend of Mr. Henry. I read in the papers that you were fighting for the property rights. You knew my father-in-law." "I knew him since we were boys. We grew up together here in the region. I saw when he bought this land. I saw when they started stealing pieces of it. I saw him suffer in silence for decades." John looked around as if reliving old memories. "Henry asked me to look for you if you ever needed help proving the rights to this land." "What do you mean?" "He gave me this." John pulled a yellowed envelope from his pocket. "He said that if one day his grandchildren were left without a father, and his daughter-in-law was a woman of courage, I should give this to her." Elizabeth opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter, in Henry's careful penmanship. "Elizabeth, if you are reading this letter, it means my time has come, and you are fighting for what is rightfully yours. I knew that Marcus and Amanda wouldn't care about justice, only about easy money. But you were always different. I saw how you cared for Daniel in his last years of illness. I saw how you love the children. I saw that you have a strong heart and don't give up easily. The lands I left for you are just the beginning. This property has always been larger than anyone imagines. Over the years, corrupt officials and land grabbers have been stealing pieces, but I kept every document, every proof, every piece of evidence. If you have reached the point of reading this letter, you must have found the boxes I buried. But there is one last thing that only John knows. In the house where we lived when I was a child, now just ruins on the upper part of the property, there is a trapdoor under what remains of the wood-burning stove. There are the most important documents, the proof that half the town was built on land stolen from our family. Use this evidence to give the children the life they deserve. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Use the wealth to help those in need, not just to accumulate more wealth. Your father-in-law who loves you like a daughter, Henry Mitchell." Elizabeth finished reading the letter with tears in her eyes. John waited patiently, his hat in his hands. "John, do you know where that old house is?" "I do. It's a half-hour walk up the hill. Almost nothing is left, but the wood-burning stove is still there." "Can you take me there?" "I can. But Mrs. Elizabeth, that climb is tough and the place is isolated. If there are people with bad intentions lurking around here, we will take protection, and we will take witnesses. Anything we find there needs to be officially documented." The next day, a small group climbed the steep trail leading to the ruins of the old house. Elizabeth, John, Dr. Charles, an expert from the federal prosecutor's office, 2 federal agents, and an official photographer. The ruins were older than Elizabeth had expected. Only partially collapsed stone walls, and in the center a wood-burning stove built of fire brick that had withstood time. "It's here," said John, pointing to one of the stones at the base of the stove. "Henry showed me once, many years ago. With the help of the agents, they carefully removed the stones indicated by John. Underneath, there was a cavity lined with tin, protecting a wooden box larger than all the others. Inside the box, Elizabeth found treasures she hadn't even imagined in her most optimistic dreams. Dozens of original documents, detailed maps of the entire region, old photographs showing property markers, and a detailed diary that Henry had kept for decades, documenting every invasion, every illegal sale, every bribe he had witnessed. "My God," murmured Dr. Charles, leafing through the documents, "this is pure dynamite. We have evidence not only of the land-grabbing scheme, but names, dates, amounts, decades of crimes documented in detail. What does this mean for my case? It means you won't just recover your land. You'll expose a corruption scheme involving mayors, judges, notary clerks, business people. People who thought they were untouchable will have to answer for crimes committed over decades." Elizabeth sat on one of the stones of the ruins, looking at the view stretching out below. From up there she could see the whole town, the industrial district, the surrounding farms. And now she knew that much of all that had been built on land that belonged to her family. "John," she said to the elderly man, "did Henry really foresee all this?" "Henry was very intelligent, Mrs. Elizabeth. He knew that one day someone in the family would have to fight for justice, and he chose you for this fight because he knew you wouldn't give up." When they went down the trail back to the house, Elizabeth felt transformed. No longer the desperate widow who had arrived there with 3 children and an old suitcase. Now she was the guardian of a truth that could change not only her life, but the lives of hundreds of families who had been victims of the same scheme over the years. But she also knew that from now on the danger would be even greater. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out, now continuing. In the week following the discoveries at the ruins, Elizabeth's life changed completely. Journalists from national outlets came to the property. The case gained coverage on television programs. Lawyers from across the country offered their services. But along with the fame came even greater pressures. One morning, Elizabeth was awakened by the phone ringing insistently. When she answered, an altered voice on the other end said, "You have 48 hours to accept our final offer. After that, we can no longer guarantee your family's safety." Elizabeth hung up the phone, trembling. The threats were becoming more direct, more specific, and now they involved a deadline. She immediately called Dr. Charles, who arrived in less than an hour, accompanied by police reinforcements. "Elizabeth, the time has come for you all to leave here temporarily," said the prosecutor. "The evidence we found in the ruins is so compromising that some people may be willing to do anything to prevent it from reaching the courts. Where would we go? We have a safe house in the capital. You would stay there until we complete the arrests of the main people involved in the scheme." Elizabeth looked at the children playing in the yard. Emily had made friends with children from the neighborhood. Oliver helped take care of the chickens every day. Benjamin was taking his first steps on the packed dirt floor of the rebuilt house. Duke had become the king of that small territory. "Doctor, how long would it be?" "A few weeks, maybe 2 months at most." "And after?" "After you return as the rightful owners of one of the largest fortunes in the state of Kentucky." That night, Elizabeth talked with the children. Emily, already 9 years old, understood more than her younger brothers about the situation. "Mommy, are we going to have to move again?" "It's temporary, my love, like a vacation in the big city." "And Duke?" "Duke comes with us." "And the chickens?" Elizabeth smiled. Even amid all the tension, the children's concerns remained the simplest and purest. "John will take care of the chickens for us." The next morning, Elizabeth packed up their few belongings again and said a temporary goodbye to the house that had become the symbol of her struggle. Martha would stay to look after the property, along with the federal agents who had set up a permanent surveillance post. "Don't worry," said Henry's friend. "When you come back, everything will be just as you left it, and you'll return as the owners of all this." The safe house in the capital was comfortable but impersonal, an anonymous apartment in a middle-class building with basic furniture and cable television. The children were initially excited about the television. They hadn't watched children's shows in months. But after a few days, they began to miss the freedom of running in the yard, playing with the animals, the view of the mountains. "When are we going back home?" Oliver would ask every day. Elizabeth also felt suffocated in the city, accustomed to the wide-open fields and the quiet of the rural property. The constant noise of traffic and the feeling of confinement made her anxious. But Dr. Charles brought good news with each visit. The investigation is progressing very well, he said during a visit in the second week. Based on the documents we found, we've obtained arrest warrants for 12 people, including Marcus and Amanda. Were they arrested? Marcus was. Amanda fled, but we already have a nationwide search and seizure warrant. She won't be able to hide for long. And the others involved? 3 businessmen have already been detained. The notary office that falsified documents has been sealed. The former mayor who authorized the irregular land seizures is being sought. Elizabeth felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction at seeing that there would finally be justice. Sadness at seeing family members arrested because of greed. Dr. Charles, what about the other families who were harmed? Will they recover their rights too? That's another important aspect of the case. Based on Henry's documents, we've identified at least 20 families who lost land illegally. They will all be contacted and guided on how to claim their rights. So Henry didn't just leave an inheritance for us. He left justice for many people. Exactly. He knew his courage to fight would benefit not just his family, but the entire community. In the 3rd week of confinement, Elizabeth received an unexpected visitor. It was Dorothy, the neighbor who had tried to manipulate her at the beginning of it all. "Elizabeth, I need to talk to you," said the woman, visibly shaken. "What do you want, Dorothy?" "To ask for forgiveness and to tell the truth about everything." Elizabeth decided to listen. Dorothy explained that she had been blackmailed by the land grabbers. They had evidence that she had irregularly occupied part of a neighboring property years before, and they threatened to report her if she didn't cooperate by spying on and manipulating Elizabeth. "I never meant to harm you or the children," said Dorothy, crying. "But they told me if I didn't help, I would lose my home, my animals, everything I've built in my life. And now? Now I want to cooperate with the justice system. I have recordings of conversations, documents they asked me to sign, names of other people involved." Elizabeth felt torn. On one hand, Dorothy had betrayed her trust. On the other, she too had been a victim of the same intimidation scheme. "Dorothy, you'll have to speak with Dr. Charles. I can't forgive or condemn you. That's for the justice system." "I understand. I just wanted you to know it was never personal, and that I've always admired your courage." After Dorothy left, Elizabeth kept thinking about how many people had been caught up in that scheme, some as perpetrators, others as victims forced to cooperate out of fear or blackmail. The conversation with Dr. Charles about Dorothy's testimony brought even more surprising revelations. "With the information she provided, we've been able to map a much larger network than we imagined," said the prosecutor. "The land-grabbing scheme wasn't limited to your region. It extended across 3 counties and involved more than 50 properties. 50 properties, and at least 100 families harmed over the last 30 years. Elizabeth, your case has become ground zero for one of the largest land-grabbing investigations in Kentucky's history." Elizabeth felt crushed by the scale of what she was uncovering. "Dr. Charles, I just wanted a safe house for my children. And by fighting for that, you ended up exposing a corruption system that was harming hundreds of families. Henry chose the right person to safeguard those documents. In the 4th week, the news Elizabeth had been waiting for finally arrived. "All the arrest warrants have been executed," announced Dr. Charles. "The scheme has been dismantled. You can return home safely." Elizabeth felt immense relief. The children celebrated as if it were Christmas. Even Duke seemed to understand they were finally going home, running in circles around the apartment. The trip back to the property was emotional. When the car stopped in front of the rebuilt house, Elizabeth saw that Martha and John had prepared a small welcome party. Neighbors she barely knew were in the yard with balloons and homemade food. "Welcome back, Mrs. Elizabeth," said Mr. Walter, the neighboring farmer. "You've become a local hero. Everyone is talking about the brave woman who faced the land grabbers and returned the land to its rightful owners." Emily ran to see the chickens, which John had tenderly cared for. Oliver threw himself onto the packed dirt floor as if reuniting with an old friend. Benjamin, who had visibly grown during the 4 weeks of absence, crawled through the house as if exploring a familiar yet somehow new territory. That night, for the first time in months, Elizabeth slept deeply. The danger had passed. Justice was being served. And finally, her family could live in peace in the house Henry had left for them. But the real surprise was yet to come. The next morning, Dr. Charles arrived accompanied by a man in an expensive suit and a woman with a document case. "Elizabeth, these are the court-appointed experts responsible for calculating the compensation owed to you," said the prosecutor. "Compensation? For the years of misuse of your lands, for the unauthorized commercial exploitation, for the damages caused to the property?" The expert opened his case and showed detailed spreadsheets. "Mrs. Elizabeth, we've calculated that over the last 20 years, approximately 120 companies operated on lands that legally belong to your family. The compensation amount, including interest and monetary correction," he made a dramatic pause, "is $180 million. Elizabeth needed to sit down. 180 million. It was a number so large she couldn't even visualize what it meant. That's real? It's real. And there's more. Many of the companies that bought land illegally prefer to settle out of court rather than face lengthy lawsuits. We already have purchase offers for several areas at above market values. How much above market? If you decide to sell just half of the land you recovered, keeping the house and a reasonable area around it, you could easily pocket another $50 million. Elizabeth looked out the window. Emily was teaching Oliver how to plant tomato seedlings in a small garden they had started before traveling to the capital. Benjamin was playing with Duke in the shade of the tree Henry had planted decades before. "And if I don't want to sell, then you will be the owner of one of the largest land holdings in the region. You can develop your own projects, lease to others, create a model farm. The possibilities are endless. But the compensation money, will I receive it regardless?" "You will. It's a clear and certain right. The money should be available within 3 months, after all legal formalities are completed." After Dr. Charles and the experts left, Elizabeth was alone with her thoughts. In less than a year, she had gone from a penniless widow to one of the wealthiest women in Kentucky. But what impressed her most wasn't the amount of money. It was the feeling that Henry had orchestrated it all decades before, patiently waiting for the right moment for his family to claim justice. That afternoon, she walked to the place where it all began, where Duke dug and found the first buried box. There was a simple plaque that John had placed there with the phrase, "Here began the fight for justice." Elizabeth knelt and touched the earth. "Thank you, Henry," she whispered. "You didn't just leave an inheritance. You left a lesson about never giving up on what's right." In the following months, while awaiting the release of the compensation, Elizabeth began to plan the future. But her ideas were very different from what anyone might expect from someone who had become a multi-millionaire overnight. First, she had the clay house completely restored, preserving its original architecture but adding modern comforts. The house became a perfect blend of tradition and modernity. Second, she created a fund to help other families in the region who had been victims of land grabbing. With the help of Dr. Charles, she assembled a team of lawyers specialized in land recovery to offer free services. Third, she established a sustainable development project in the region, creating jobs for the local community without destroying the rural environment she had learned to love. "Why don't you move to a mansion in the capital?" asked a journalist during an interview. "With all this money, you could live like a queen." "Because I already live like a queen," replied Elizabeth, watching the children playing in the yard. "I have a healthy family, a house that is truly ours, and the certainty that we are making a difference in other people's lives. What queen has more than that?" 6 months after returning to the property, Elizabeth inaugurated the Henry Mitchell Community Center, a rural school that offered quality education for children in the region, vocational courses for adults, and free legal advice for land issues. On the opening day, hundreds of people from the region attended. Families who had recovered their lands thanks to the evidence found by Elizabeth, neighbors who got jobs in the sustainable development projects, children who now had access to quality education without having to move to the city. "Henry would be proud," said Martha, now the administrative director of the community center. "He knew that if I found those documents, I wouldn't keep the inheritance just for myself," replied Elizabeth. "He trusted that I would do the right thing with what I discovered." As the years passed, Elizabeth's story became legendary in the region. The woman who arrived with 3 children and an old suitcase inherited a clay house falling apart and discovered that what was underneath was much more than gold or money. It was the opportunity to transform an entire community. Emily grew up and became a lawyer, specializing in agrarian law to continue her mother's work. Oliver graduated in environmental engineering and developed sustainability projects for small rural producers. Benjamin, still young, already showed interest in caring for the animals and the land, promising to maintain the family's connection to its rural roots. Duke aged with dignity, surrounded by descendants who became the unofficial guardians of the entire property. The chickens multiplied and spread, bringing life and movement to every corner of the land. And the restored clay house, maintaining its original essence, remained at the center of everything, not as a symbol of poverty or abandonment, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are right beneath our feet, waiting only for us to have the courage to dig deep enough to find them. 10 years after that first day, when Elizabeth arrived at the property, she was sitting on the house's porch at dusk, watching Benjamin play with Duke's puppies while Emily and Oliver returned from work at the community center. A young journalist had come to do a story on the 10-year anniversary of the Elizabeth Mitchell case, as it had become known nationally. "Mrs. Elizabeth, if you could go back in time, would you do anything differently?" Elizabeth thought for a moment, observing the prosperous property around her, the social projects running smoothly, the dozens of families who had recovered their land. "Perhaps I would have dug deeper from the very first day," she said finally, smiling. "Henry left far more than I ever imagined. Not just documents or land rights. He left a lesson on how an ordinary person can make a difference in the lives of so many, provided they have the courage to fight for what's right." "And what advice would you give to other people going through similar difficulties?" Elizabeth looked at the clay house that had become the symbol of her victory, yet remained as simple and welcoming as ever. That they never stop digging. Sometimes what's buried isn't gold or money. Sometimes it's the opportunity to discover that we are stronger than we thought, and that our struggle can pave the way for others to achieve justice as well. "One last question, Mrs. Elizabeth. What would you say to Henry if you could speak to him today?" Elizabeth felt her eyes fill with tears, but they were tears of gratitude. "I would tell him he chose the right person, that I kept the promise to care for the children and the land, and that the legacy he left didn't just enrich our family, it enriched the entire community. I think that's what he wanted from the very beginning." When the journalist left, Elizabeth remained on the porch until the stars appeared. It was the same porch where she had so often sat in those first months, worried about the future, unsure how she would support the children. Now, 10 years later, she was one of the wealthiest and most respected women in the region. But what made her proudest wasn't the numbers in her bank account or the successful business ventures. It was seeing Emily defending small farmers in court. It was seeing Oliver developing technologies that helped family farmers be more productive without harming the environment. It was seeing Benjamin growing up with solid values, understanding that true wealth is measured by the capacity to help others. It was knowing that dozens of families had recovered their land and their dignity, thanks to the courage of a widow who refused to accept crumbs when she knew she deserved a feast. It was understanding that Henry hadn't left just a material inheritance. He had left a legacy of justice, courage, and social responsibility that would continue to influence generations. And most important of all, it was the certainty that this simple clay house, which had once seemed like a curse, had revealed itself to be the greatest blessing her family could have received. Because no matter how many millions she had in the bank, how many projects she managed, how many people she helped, that house remained the place where she was simply Elizabeth, mother of 3 wonderful children, guardian of a land that carried stories of courage and determination. And every night when she closed her eyes in that rebuilt but true to its roots house, Elizabeth knew that Henry would approve of everything she had done with his inheritance. She knew she had kept the silent promise to never give up, to always fight for what was right, and to use the discovered resources not to isolate herself in luxury, but to build bridges that would help other people also find their own buried treasures. And that sometimes the greatest treasure we can leave for our children is not money in the bank, but the example that it is worth fighting for justice, even when everyone says it is impossible to win. especially when everyone says it is impossible to win. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story and where you are watching from. If you have any similar experience to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you think Elizabeth made the right decisions? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.